Welcome to the video guide for Ayaha and Otaha's Wrath, Legend, the latest Agito Uprising boss fight difficulty released as part of patch 2.8.0 of Dragalia Lost. The fourth and likely penultimate of the Legend difficulty Agito fights to be released, Legend Ayaha and Otaha continues to build upon the twins fight and keeps things fresh with new mechanics. As always, it's considered optional content for players who are well into their endgame, so don't slack with your weapon bonuses and facility levels if you hope to clear this. My name is Xenozilus, and let's get straight to it. While Legend Twins can be said to resemble the Expert fight more than the other difficulties, the Legend difficulty changes things up so much that it doesn't really resemble Expert nearly as much as the other Legend Agito difficulties resemble theirs. At the very least, Ayaha and Otaha maintain their abilities from previous difficulties. The Twins Tessenbo ability is more punishing this time round, reducing all instances of damage to 1 point instead of the flat defensive buff it gave before. As with all Agito fights, certain mechanics and attacks will be skipped or repeated based on phase progression and remaining hit points. The twins start the fight by splitting to opposite sides of the arena and using Kagami Awase. Each adventurer is targeted by both twins in a series of dashes marked by red telegraphs. Dodge and iframe these as appropriate. Once 4 pairs of dashes have occurred, the twins will use Nirameko. The first hit count check of the fight, each twin will present a weak point requiring 60 hits to clear in co-op, or 15 in solo. A combination of high hit count characters such as Lapis and Gallimascular and overdamage skills should handle this. After clearing the check, the twins will start their filler rotations. I recommend players group in the top left near Otaha, as Ayaha will approach with her attacks. Baiting the twins together will increase overall damage output. After a few mechanics that you should recognize from previous difficulties, the twins use Ahain Nasai. Otaha charges a persistent spinning attack in the middle of the arena that sucks inwards, while Ayaha preps a spinning attack around the outside edge of the arena. Dodge or iframe this as necessary, taking care not to get caught by Otaha. After this, blue butterflies will spawn on each player, dropping tracking a second before they detonate. After this, Ayaha will target a player with a red dash. Bait this into Otaha to inflict a large amount of damage and stun on the twins. A small word of warning: even though the dash stops on Otaha, be wary of standing in the telegraph. Desync between players and the host in co-op can cause players to take lethal damage from the dash even if they shouldn't, so I recommend playing it safe and staying out of the telegraph or iframing. That covers it for the new mechanics of Phase 1. You'll see more filler mechanics and repeated mechanics until you clear the first health bar. Once that's done, we move on to Phase 2. Phase 2 starts with Oningyo Asobi. A pair of phantoms are spawned, sharing a hit count check to destroy them. These phantoms also grant the boss invulnerability while they're alive. Shortly after spawning, they approach the middle of the arena to cast Otedama. This mechanic launches you into the air, dealing scaling damage depending on the count remaining on the phantoms. There's a couple of ways to handle this: freezing the phantoms to interrupt the cast, transforming into a dragon to negate the launch, or using certain buffs that prevent knockbacks such as those from Gallimascular or Gala Elizan. In solo, you can take advantage of the fact that your AI take reduced damage, relying on dragon or knockback immunity for the character you control. The most common way I see this dealt with in co-op is freeze. Bring Lily Skillshare or a well-piloted dragon you'll clear. The phantoms are typically killed soon after the freeze with enough hit count and overdamage, but if they aren't destroyed, they'll cast Koma Mawashi. The phantoms will take up a line formation, spawning red telegraphs on the edges of the arena with purple in the middle before spinning through the arena. Iframe near the edge to avoid this. If the phantoms still aren't killed, they'll cast Kagami Awase, the 4-dash mechanic seen at the start of Phase 1. Once the phantoms are dealt with, the boss will be vulnerable again. After a short pause comes Iro Asobi, a room-wide purple AoE that grants 2 buffs, red Hagoromo and blue Hagoromo, represented by pink and blue butterfly icons. The red buff changes burn attacks by the twins to inflict Scorch Rend instead, as well as buffing all attacks to inflict Shapeshift and skill suppression. The blue buff causes boss attacks to ignore shields and life shields, as well as inflicting skill suppression. Dispel both of these buffs to make your life easier. Shortly after this, the twins cast an exclamation point telegraphed close range AoE, followed by the familiar Hana Ichimonme and Abukatata Nietata mechanics. Deal with this as you normally would, with a slight caveat. Previous difficulties didn't really lean towards any clear preference for the order the white and black butterflies were dealt with, but in Legend runs I've seen a preference for clearing the black butterfly first, and then delaying killing the white butterfly to the last moment possible, so that the twins are fully vulnerable upon landing. It's also typical to hold a freeze to catch them as they land, removing both Warabe Asobi buffs as soon as possible. Once they land, you'll see Eru Asobi again, followed by Kage Okuri. This is mostly similar to Master, but it's now a coin flip between black and white butterflies. You'll generally want to drop these on the boss, but if you have non-stun resist adventurers on your team, you may want to drop black butterflies away from the boss for reasons that will soon become apparent. Shortly after these are red butterflies. These function similarly, but they don't leave bubbles behind, as well as dispelling buffs on the boss if the butterflies are dropped at their feet. This is followed by Onigoko. This brings the familiar crosshair and blue butterfly that you'll want to lead into the boss. However, the bubbles from Kage Okuri may pose an obstacle. If the blue butterfly is active for too long, it will trigger a series of room-wide claps that inflict heavy damage and knockback, potentially causing issues if a burn-resist adventurer needs to lead the butterfly around black bubbles. Following these mechanics are your typical filler mechanics, although there's a change to note. The wing swipes now also shoot out some untelegraphed butterfly projectiles. These can be iframed, but be mindful of being downwind of the wing attacks. That about covers the new mechanics and changes to mechanics in Phase 2. Rinse and repeat until the boss reaches roughly 35% hit points, which will interrupt the boss's rotation and instantly enter Berserk phase. There's no more avoiding the Berserk phase, unfortunately. Akada's always watching. Unlike the rest of the Yagato fights, which is becoming a bit of a pattern for the twins, Berserk doesn't ramp up their offensive power nearly as much, and Berserk introduces a tiny new combination of mechanics rather than just being like the rest of the fight, except with missing telegraphs. Berserk phase starts with the phantoms being spawned again, but they launch into Ahai Nasai. The mechanic can be handled as before, but note that the boss will still be active and throwing out dash attacks. The best way to handle Ahai Nasai and Berserk is to just skip it entirely with a well-timed freeze just before the white phantom starts spinning, but this can be a bit tricky in solo. Once the phantoms are dealt with, the boss gains multiple stacks of the Immutable Nature buff, making them immune to afflictions and thus making it impossible to disable the Warabe Asobi buffs until these Immutable Nature buffs are fully dispelled. Deal with these buffs as soon as possible, since if the twins' strength buffs are left unchecked, they'll soon scale to the point of killing you in one shot with a buffed Eru Asobi. Dodge iframe until the mechanics calm down, sneaking and dispels until Immutable Nature is fully removed, then resume your typical beatdown while handling all the mechanics being thrown at you at the same time. Berserk Twins is a bit of a light show. You'll be contending with multiple sets of lasers while butterflies and bubbles litter the field. Add a Masculine to the mix and you'll be frying an egg on the back of your phone in no time. If you and your device survive the onslaught, you'll be a couple of breaks away from clearing the fight. When it comes to things to keep note of going into the fight, I'd bring the most attention to learning when to hold freeze skills to skip mechanics. There's 3 common freeze timings. At the start of Phase 2 to skip Otodama, after the first Dabukutata Nietata, and at the start of Berserk to skip Ahai Nasai. If you're bringing a freeze-capable adventurer or a Lily Skillshare, be wary of using your freeze too close to these timings, as being caught without them can be troublesome. I also have a recommendation for those learning the fight. At the start of Phase 2 while the phantoms are still up, and at the start of Berserk before Immutable Nature is dispelled, consider toggling to the defensive mode of your Agato weapon if you're using your weapon skill. Since all instances of damage are reduced to 1, there's little benefit to using the offense mode, and toggling on the defense mode will help ease up stress on the healer, who needs to ensure you survive claps, especially if you're a stun-resist adventurer taking extra damage from Burn or Scorch Rend. When it comes to team compositions for this fight, there's a few requirements that you'll need to be able to handle with your team. For standard runs, you'll want at least 1 adventurer capable of quickly achieving high hit counts, 2 for co-op, and a convenient source of freeze. The hit count requirement is commonly fulfilled by a combination of Masculine and or Lapis, and freeze is most commonly handled by having 1 adventurer bring Lily Skillshare. Another handy freeze option is Dragon Your Clear, since she has guaranteed freeze attached to a 4-strike buff. While other adventurers are able to inflict freeze, the lack of a guarantee from a non-200% freeze chance can lead to some poor luck, making a run more tricky than it has to be. If you're looking to clear for the first time, I'd likely opt for the Lily Skillshare and leave more adventurous choices to after you're more comfortable with the fight. In terms of other DPS units, there's a slight preference for stun resist characters due to the Kage Okuri and Onigoko mechanics. If you wind up with burning bubbles, it's not disastrous if you have to eat a burn to pull the blue butterfly into the boss. A burn resist character runs the risk of getting stunned against black bubbles, however, which can lead to you eating the blue butterfly yourself. even outside of that set of mechanics, stun resist adventurers don't have to contend with getting comboed by the boss due to being rendered immobile, and getting burned or scorch rent isn't as much of an issue if you have regens to help counteract the damage. When it comes to healer choices, the safest choice is a spiraled Nurse Aileen. Her stun resist is coupled with 2 heals and a slight HP buff, as long as the rest of the team knows to group up for her burst heals. She also has a stun heal on her S2, but in the chaos of the fight it might be a bit tricky to use in emergency situations. After Nurse Aileen, Zhang Xia can roughly match her in terms of healing, but you may want to give her stun resist through Wormprint affinities to make her a bit sturdier. Dragonure Lily is unique in that she has dual resistances, but is a bit more fiddly to pilot in my experience. For those of you with supreme confidence, it's possible to use a Gala Elizan as your healer if you add a couple of heal skill shares. Her kit adds a hefty flame resist buff and additional regen with her spiral, making her well suited to take on a healer role once you and your team are able to handle the fight with no more than a handful of small mistakes. If you have further questions, feel free to leave a comment or pop by my Twitch streams. I stream Wednesdays and Saturdays at 9:30 PM BST. As always, take it easy, stay safe, and I'll see you next time.